This online learning module is a special edition from the work of Gabriele Wulf. Dr. Wulf is a researcher of German descent, now residing in the Faculty of Kinesiology at the University of Las Vegas. Her textbook, Attention and Motor Skill Learning, has been well received over the years in the motor learning discipline, and the specific chapter that we're drawing from her work today will be the chapter 7 on special populations with respect to attention and focus. This chapter extends the discussion that we've had previously on attentional focus effects on motor performance and applies the concept specifically to special populations. In particular, we're going to be concerning ourselves with children, people who are elderly, or those who are experiencing another type of anomaly that would allow them to be considered atypical in our population. For example, persons with Parkinson's disease or cerebrovascular accidents. As you'll see, instructions to adopt an external focus enhance the performance of motor skills in these populations as well. Some of these findings have implications for training procedures used in rehab settings. Additionally, there is some preliminary evidence that attentional focus instructions also have an effect on oral motor control, which may have implications for those of you interested in speech therapy. Now, while a lot of focus is on attention in this particular OLM, this chapter is a good example of how motor learning is used in a lot of different ways by a variety of people from a varying backgrounds. Some of the authors that will be cited in this online learning module are actually from areas outside of kinesiology and rehabilitation. For example, those that may be in engineering or in other aspects of medicine. We know that there's often insufficient evidence with respect to children in motor learning, and there's lots of reasons for that, some being that children are hard to recruit, they're marginalized or vulnerable populations, they take another level of ethics requirement in order to do research, parent consent, there's lots of different reasons why. But Jennifer Thorne at the Florida State University of Tallahassee conducted a study with children ages 9 to 12 years old, and her goal was to examine whether balance performance would differ as a function of the focus instructions given to them. Thorne used a Biodex balance system, which I'll show you on the next slide in a moment. It consisted of a movable force platform that measures a person's postural sway. The task can be made more or less difficult through adjustments in the stability of that platform. The children were assigned to groups that were instructed to either keep their feet still, in other words, an internal focus group, concentrating on something within their body, or to keep the platform still, an external focus group. Each child performed several practice trials under one of these two conditions. 2 days later, each child came back and completed a retention test, for which no attentional focus instructions were given. Thorne also added an interesting feature to her experiment, namely a questionnaire in which she asked the participants what they were thinking about when they were standing on the balance platform. Well, it's probably fair to assume that those of us that are adults typically follow the instructions given to them during a research experiment, and the use of attentional focus that they are instructed to use will be done properly. Although even in adults, there's no guarantee, right? Thorne wanted to be sure that the children actually were focusing on their feet or the platform as instructed. And again, we know that kids are easily distracted, so this is actually, it turned out to be a good idea for her to ask this question, because not all children did use the instructed attentional focus. However, among those who did, the children who were asked to keep the platform still showed less postural sway than those who were told to keep their feet still. That is, children who adopted the external focus demonstrated more effective balance performance after the 2-day retention interval. These photos represent an example of the Biodex balance system, two different ones. The one that was used in Wulf's study looked more like the one on the right-hand side. The monitor of the apparatus was covered so that the participants wouldn't receive feedback about their stability, which might have directed their attention away from the attentional focus instructions that were given to them. The fact that even children as young as 9 to 12 years old can benefit from an external focus of instructions has important implications for physical education teachers. Thorne's findings suggest that teachers should make an effort to word the instructions they give their students in such a way that their attention is directed to the movement outcome. Even if children are not always attentive and might not continuously maintain their instructed focus, external focus instructions should nevertheless have a more beneficial influence on learning than instructions that direct their attention to their own movements. The success experience resulting from this is especially important at a younger age. Such success might not only increase students' motivation for continued practice, but even motivate them to take up other sports and keep playing sports throughout adolescence and early adulthood. As we start talking about specific populations with respect to attention, focus, and motor skills, I want to direct your attention to three of the videos. There's a number of videos in this OLM. They are not embedded in the lecture that you're hearing now, but instead they'll be found as supporting documents in the folder I've prepared for you with respect to this online learning module. So these three that you're looking at here, the links for those three, pardon me, are Powtoons, just small little vignettes of video that I've created and focused the attention of these three in particular on blood flow and how that impacts um, attention and brain activity. So at the end of this, be sure to go in and watch these three. There's going to be other videos, another 3 or 4 throughout this OLM, and the expectation will be that just because they're not embedded in this video, I still like you to have a look at them and of course take the appropriate notes that you need to. Aging, of course, is something that none of us can avoid, and of course some of us are closer to feeling the effects of aging than others. So we know that as adults get older and move on in their life, sometimes there are adaptations that are necessary in order for them to continue having motor functionality and freedom of movement. Daily activity living can be more challenging, and we talk about functional movement as being a higher priority when you get a little bit older. I will let you know that I do teach a course on physical activity in the older adults. That is only typically offered once every couple of years, and so just keep your eyes open for it if you're interested in this particular topic. But of course, compounding the difficulties of motor movement will be the onset of disease, and that could be any number of problems, of course, whether it be a stroke or other traumatic brain injury, Parkinson's disease, or diabetes, or any of the other sort of issues that happen to older adults. In this next little section, we're going to talk about some research that was done by Weir in 2005 with respect to eye-hand coordination pursuit tasks. Eye-hand coordination is required in many activities of daily living, such as chopping up food for dinner, eating with a knife and fork, or writing or driving a car. As reaction time and the speed of responses typically decrease with age, we wanted to know whether instructing older individuals to adopt an external focus could enhance their performance on a task that required the coordination of visual information and hand movements. This might have practical implications for a variety of real-life tasks, including those that are potentially dangerous, like I mentioned before, cutting up vegetables with a sharp knife. In Weir's study, they compared the performance of older adults, which had an average age of about 70, to those of younger adults around your age, around 21 years of age, on a pursuit rotor tracking task. Participants standing in front of the apparatus attempted to track a target light, which was moving vertically in a circle with a stylus. Now, the average time during which participants had the cursor on the target is shown in figure 7-1 on your screen, for each group as well as for the target, speed, and focus condition. Not surprisingly, younger adults generally performed more effectively than older adults. More interestingly, though, when participants focused on the stylus, which is an external focus, their time on target was greater than when they focused on the knuckle of their thumb, which is an internal focus, even though the two were very close to each other and aligned with the target. You can also see the advantage of adopting an external focus, and as it tended to increase with the relative difficulty of the task. With increasing speed of the target cursor and increasing age of the participant, the difference between the internal and external focus conditions became larger as well. These results provide preliminary evidence that adopting an external focus can be effective even for elderly persons, or perhaps particularly for this age group, for whom many tasks become more challenging as the years go on. The next study we're going to look at by Hauer and colleagues is going to examine the loss of cognitive function, and in particular dementia. You'll note that dementia, as you see in the slide, has a variety of different ailments. If for those that don't recall, Lewy body dementia is what Robin Williams suffered from prior to his untimely death. And so we're going to take a closer look at, just again as an example of some of the research being done in this field. But I would encourage you, if you want to know a little bit more about dementia now, to pause the video and check out Dementia 101, which is one of your assigned videos for this particular OLM, or you can pick it up later on if you want to. This study, titled Physical Training Improves Motor Performance in People with Dementia, is a RCT, or a randomized control trial, which is the gold standard of research. It was based on the fact that some previous studies had suggested that cognitive impairment and severity of impairment negatively affect the results of physical training intervention. So let's take a little bit of a closer look at the methodology for this particular study done in 2012. So the question was whether or not a dementia-specific, intensive, standardized exercise program could improve motor performance in individuals with diagnostically confirmed mild to moderate dementia. A secondary analysis of this particular study were related to the generalization and sustainability of training effects, predictors of training response, and the effects on physical activity. So I want you to consider some of these findings in the context of the implications if you were to be involved with creating or supporting a functional training program for somebody with dementia. Have a read of these interesting realizations of the study, and we'll summarize this RCT in the next slide. The authors of this study conclude that the general level of cognitive impairment and specific performance in cognitive subdomains, as well as the form of dementia, do not influence the training response. In other words, results further confirm that an excellent training response can be achieved despite cognitive impairments. You should have an understanding of what Parkinson's disease is before we discuss it in detail. So this might be a good time for you to take a quick pause of this video and switch over to some of the supplementary videos I've provided you in your OLM folder. After you do that, come on back and we'll have a conversation in a little bit more detail about some of the work done in the area of Parkinson's disease with respect to motor skills. A study done with Parkinson's disease, or referred to as PD, patients explored the generalizability of the attentional focus effects to persons with PD. Specifically, they wanted to determine whether balance in individuals who have PD and a history of falls could be improved by giving them external focus instructions relative to internal focus or no attentional focus instructions at all, which was the control condition. For this experiment, a Neurocom Smart Balance Master System was used, and you'll see that in the readings on page 178. The system measures postural sway while the participant is standing still, and is designed to quantify an individual's ability to maintain balance under a variety of conditions. The participants in this study averaged of about 72 to 73 years of age, and they were tested under 3 conditions, which you see here on this slide. You can read the full details of the methodology on that same page of the picture that I mentioned earlier. The equilibrium scores for each condition are shown in figure 7.2 on your slide. Even though there were no attentional focus differences for the 2 easy conditions, in other words, eyes open or eyes closed on the stable support surface, benefits of an external focus did emerge under the sway referenced conditions. Instructing participants to focus on the rectangles under their feet resulted in greater stability than instructing them to focus on their feet or not giving them any focus instructions at all. Additionally, as in previous studies, internal focus and control conditions produced similar scores. Furthermore, during the sway referenced conditions, several falls occurred under both internal focus and control conditions, but not under the external focus condition. Falls in this case are instances in which the participant completely lost his or her balance and had to be supported by the harness that was being worn. Thus, when the task was challenging enough, the benefits of an external focus were clearly seen. For the next series of slides, I provided you with a few notes to support some of the reading that you'll do, but and again, I'm not going to go through in great detail each of these particular conditions, but did you know that approximately every 45 seconds somewhere in North America somebody is having a stroke, and every 3 minutes actually somebody dies of a stroke? It is such a prevalent disease. People who are lucky enough to survive, however, often suffer from the consequences, which includes paralysis, spasticity, balance problems, or speech and language problems. Often fine motor skills are affected, such as the use of the fingers to pick up an object. So physical and occupational therapists work hard with people after stroke to practice these skills. In fact, people who have a stroke constitute the largest group of patients who are treated by OTs in North America. This study takes a closer look at performance of daily occupational tasks for those victims of a cerebrovascular accident. The results support the use of externally focused instructions directed towards naturalistic task performance to improve movement speed and force in the hemiparetic arm after a stroke. This research by Susan Fasoli and her colleagues reinforces the need for therapists to consider their use of instructions when evaluating and treating movement disorders after a stroke. One explanation for these findings is that the effects of instruction on movement time and peak velocity are related to the type of sensory processes emphasized under each condition. The externally focused instructions directed visual attention toward object affordances that were relevant for shaping the desired motor action. In other words, think about the size of the mug and the shape of the handle. In contrast, the internally focused instructions emphasized proprioceptive feedback. Think about the movement of your wrist and the hand as you reach. Although proprioception and vision both contribute a great deal to the control of coordinated movement, researchers have shown that individuals spontaneously attend more to visual information than to proprioception during motor actions. The effect of instruction on the percentage of time to peak velocity and movement units were greater in the control group. An alternate explanation is that the participants with strokes were less able to produce more pre-planned and less guided movements in response to instructions because of impaired force generation in the affected limb. Previous studies have suggested that reduced force generation may contribute to the slow, discontinuous movements seen after a cerebrovascular accident. Childhood apraxia of speech, or CAS, is a motor speech disorder. Children with CAS have problems saying sounds, syllables, and words. This is not because of muscle weakness or paralysis. The brain has problems planning to move the body parts. In other words, how to move the lips, the jaw, or the tongue that are necessary for speech. Constrained action hypothesis revisited by Wulf in 2001 explained this benefit of an external focus by explained this benefit of external focus of attention by postulating that the constrained action hypothesis. According to this hypothesis or view, individuals who utilize an internal focus constraint or freeze their motor system by consciously attempting to control it. This also seems to occur when individuals are not given attentional focused instructions, as we often see in a control scenario or control group. In contrast, however, though, an external focus promotes the use of more automatic control processes, thereby enhancing performance and learning. As has been our long-term strategy, comparison between oral facial movements and limb movements were included in the design of this study. Importantly, attentional focus during treatment of speech disorders may be a critical yet never studied variable of apraxia of speech. This study examined performance of young typical subjects to determine if we could replicate findings from the limb literature and use it in the oral motor system context. While this study employed a non-speech task, the findings suggest that attentional focus may also be an important variable to consider in treatment for speech disorders. If a similar advantageous external focus is found during a speech task, it may change speech treatments for persons with speech and/or voice disorders, since such therapy traditionally uses internal attentional focus. For example, many treatments for AOS, for example, the sound production treatment, incorporate phonetic placement instruction where typically an internal attentional focus is utilized. In other words, focus on the placement of your tongue in your mouth. An external focus of attention, for example, in a focus on an acoustic or a perceptual goal, may prove to be more effective for target acquisition and response generalization in AOS. Future studies will explore how external focus of attention may be further implemented for speech treatment, as well as how attentional disorders affect motor learning. You may recall that during growth and development class, we talked a little bit about developmental coordination disorder. And dyspraxia is a form of developmental coordination disorder that affects the fine or gross motor coordination in children and adults. An individual's coordination difficulties may affect their participation and functioning in everyday life skills, and children may present with difficulties with self-care, writing, typing, riding a bike, and just general functionality in life. In adulthood, many of these difficulties will continue, as well as learning new skills at home, and challenges such as driving a car and doing other regular activities that we assume adults can participate in become more of a challenge. Although the exact cause of dyspraxia is unknown, it's thought to be caused by a disruption in the way messages from the brain are transmitted to the body. This affects a person's ability to perform movements in a smooth, coordinated way. It may also affect speech because DCD is a lifelong condition. It's been also formally recognized by international organizations, including the World Health Organization. It's distinct from other motor disorders, such as cerebral palsy and a stroke, in that it occurs across the range of intellectual abilities. Individuals may vary in how their difficulties present, and these may change over time depending on environmental demands and life experiences. Difficulties with memory, perception, and processing are also evident with dyspraxia. While DCD is again often regarded as sort of the umbrella term that covers all motor coordination difficulties, dyspraxia refers to those people who have additional problems in planning, organizing, and carrying out movements in the right order in everyday situations. It can also affect articulation in speech, perception, and thought. The last video that I'll leave you with is a short little example of how occupational therapists or physical therapists and others interested in this particular area try to create stimulating circumstances. In the video that you'll see, again, you'll have to log on to it or just finish up this OLM and click on the dyspraxia intervention video. You'll see a neat little obstacle course that's created for the sole purpose of challenging the individual that's participating in the task and stimulating and rehearsing and practicing skills that don't come naturally for somebody that has dyspraxia. It's a really interesting topic. There's a lot of great work that's being done in Hamilton at why am I forgetting the name of the university there right now? McMaster University. And so if you're interested, it doesn't take much to search McMaster's work in that area. So this is the end of this OLM for attention and focus with special populations. Have a great day.